Hello, everyone. Welcome in. I'm Matt Olson. I'm here with Matt Derrick today, who covers the Chiefs. Matt, how are we doing today, buddy?
Doing pretty well. We're getting ready for training camp. We are 15 days away from the first
Yeah.
practice, so we're getting there. And we had a press conference today, actually talking about college football and a little bit about the stadium because the Chiefs are trying to decide
Sure.
what they're going to do with Arrowhead starting in 2031 and
hmm
beyond. So there's always something going on in Kansas City.
No, for sure. I'm here in Nashville, and I actually live about 8 minutes from the stadium. And every time I drive by it, it just gets bigger and larger and more interesting, I guess. So, just seeing that, and there is some excitement around that. I hope my biggest thing is I just want those Chiefs to keep the open air stadium. I mean, it's such a great place to visit, such a great place to see a game, and as we know, the noise is off the charts there.
Yeah, and there's a reasonable chance. I mean, I think the Hunt family in particular would love to stay at Arrowhead. There's a lot of family tradition there,
hmm
obviously. The patriarch Lamar Hunt said it was always his favorite place on earth was Arrowhead Stadium. It would be great if they could keep it because obviously it's a loud place. There's been a lot of
Sure.
history there, and honestly, at this point, outside of Soldier Field and Lambeau Field, I mean, it's now the one of the granddaddies of the NFL. So, it'd be great if they could stay, and it would be great if they could continue to be outdoors. But obviously, this team would love to be able to host, and this city would love to be able to host maybe
hmm
Final Fours and maybe a Super Bowl, and you can't do that without a roof. So, I
No,
imagine a
I
roof
hear
is
you.
coming.
Yeah, it seems to be the inevitability, unfortunately, across the league. But let's hold out until we can't, right? Um, in general, today we're going to dive into a little bit of fantasy kind of themed, call it what you will, questions, focusing on skill players on the offense. We appreciate your eyes, ears, boots on the ground, and bringing that to our listeners. And I think let's just dive right in. As we expect, the Chiefs are going to be probably one of the top teams in terms of offense. The backfield is kind of taking I don't want to say a turn or anything, but, we have Pacheco who's back, kind of a lackluster year, lackluster playoff. Kareem Hunt back on a 1 year deal. They bring in Elijah Mitchell. Um, Pick I loved, Brashard Smith ends up there, which is certainly going to be, or I think is going to be interesting. And then I don't want to forget last season's camp training hype train, Canada of the Year, Carson Steele. So when you put all of that together, what are we looking at this year? How do we see this playing out?
Yeah, when you name off that many running backs from a fantasy perspective, you're obviously thinking running back by committee, and
hmm
that's definitely what the Chiefs are thinking right now and envisioning what backfield will look like. Question is going to be, who is going to be in this backfield? Pacheco is in a contract year. He's the
hmm
clear favorite to enter the season as the incumbent starter, but like you mentioned, hasn't yet played a full season through 3 years. His rookie year, he stepped in as the starter midway through, so that kind of kept him from being a full
hmm
time, year one starter. Last 2 years, injuries have kept him and limited him. So, question's going to be, can he go through a 17 game season? I mean, it's been a while since the Chiefs have had a running back do that. So you're safe betting on the idea that there's going to be 2 or 3 guys who start for this team this year. Kareem Hunt may be one of those, but the Chiefs definitely, with Kareem at this point in his career, with the mileage on him and the size that he is now, they feel like he's much more effective as a short yardage back, a red zone back, than a goal line threat, than really doing the bulk of the work. So
mm
if Kareem has to step in, for a couple of games to be the guy, might not be what the Chiefs want, but at least they've got him for that. The one thing this offense has lacked, and a challenge for them the last 2 years. Remember, I mean, they've been the number 15 offense in the league now 2 years in a row, after being the number one offense in the league in
Sure.
2022. But the one thing that they've really lacked, really since even Damian Williams, left, has been having speed in the backfield.
hmm
And Elijah Mitchell and Brashard Smith could provide that. And Rashard Smith is interesting.
hmm
Obviously he's got a lot of talent catching the football. As a former wide receiver, got converted to running back for his final year in college. He's probably going to be a little bit more of a work in progress as a true running back. But based on what we saw in the offseason workouts, he's going to catch the balls out of the backfield. The Chiefs are going to figure out a way to get him the football in space. What I wonder is, when that inevitable injury comes to Isiah Pacheco and the Chiefs need to go to somebody, is it going to be Elijah Mitchell? Will it be Brashard Smith? And if it's Brashard Smith, does he let go of the job? That might be the, long-term potential. And again, it's hard to necessarily see that in a 7th round pick, but then that's what Isiah Pacheco was. So it's hard to imagine right now that the Chiefs have a workhorse running back. This is going to be a committee. Betting on who is going to be the head of that committee, it's hard to say. I mean, if I had to say who's going to lead this team in touchdowns, probably Kareem Hunt, because he's, I think, going to get a lot of touches in the red zone. But, it's going to be the biggest thing with the Chiefs is they need a home run hitter. And that hasn't what Isiah Pacheco has been. Mitchell and Brashard Smith, they could be those guys.
I mean, that's interesting. I mean, we've been talking about Brashard Smith and his big playability, I think, since January, and then when we see him land on the Chiefs, I think everyone just got excited. We saw what I imagine is, to your point, going to be some passes out of the backfield. How much, obviously, TBD. But I think that was something that, at least from games I watched, seemed to be missing from that offense. We saw it with Hunt here and there. But to your point, I think sometimes people think Hunt is this young guy still. But then when you actually look at the tread on the tires, to your point, it's been a minute since he's been in the, he is a veteran. He's been in the league. He's taken bumps. He's taken bruises. He's obviously had time off as well for reasons. But it's definitely going to be interesting how this backfield shakes up. That being said, do you see any world that Carson Steele's on the team this year? Or is he practice squad? Are we going to see a camp hype scenario because he's running with everyone? We got to talk about it briefly.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, Carson, I think his best pass to make this team is definitely going to be as a utility weapon, somebody, and it's going to be influenced by probably greatly how many tight ends that they keep. That's one thing that he can add to his arsenal, is playing a little bit of backup tight end, at least an H-back, somebody that can play a few of the roles that maybe you would put your third tight end to. But if the Chiefs, how many they're going to keep at tight end, they could keep 4 tight ends pretty easily. And that would really cost Carson Steele. And obviously he can play fullback as well. That gives him another, bit of utility. I think he could be a great practice squad addition, just to keep in reserve in case. Might be tough to see if he could clear waivers because another team might take a chance, but it's hard for me to see a path for Carson Steele to this roster right now with the depth that the Chiefs have in that spot.
Well, that makes sense. And, of course, as we move along here, we get into an even possibly stickier scenario in the wide receiver room. Obviously there's some unknown around Rice, but he is back. He's healthy. Hollywood Brown returns. Looking to put his, kind of reflecting on the running back scenario here, and Pacheco looking to put together his first healthy season since 2021, which is crazy. But when you go back and look at it, sure enough, Xavier Worthy looks to hopefully make that second-year leap. He obviously became a big part of the offense down the stretch. You bring Juju Smith-Schuster back. I mean, then you go and get Jalen Royals in the 4th. I feel like I'm complicating things probably for you in an explanation standpoint, but just going through these wide receivers, what do you think of their roles this year? Who do you see in the pecking order? Let's just dive into it.
Yeah, outside of a short period of time last year in training camp, we never really saw the Chiefs with their dream lineup on the field. Last year, Xavier Worthy was dinged up during OTA, so we never saw Xavier Worthy, Rashee Rice, and Hollywood Brown on the field that much. And obviously, Hollywood got hurt in the first preseason game. So outside of those couple of weeks in St. Joseph, Missouri, we never really got to see the Chiefs with their full lineup. And there was one practice in OTAs where we got to see those 3 guys on the field. And it's just electric when those 3 players are out there with Travis Kelce. It's a different lineup, but that's not what the Chiefs got at any point last year. There's questions with all 5 of the guys that you mentioned. I mean, if anything, the one player that has the least questions is Xavier Worthy. I mean, the one question is basically, can he repeat and build on what he did last year?
Sure.
With Rashee Rice, Hollywood Brown, you've got the questions of, are they healthy? How much can they contribute? Can they stay healthy? Because obviously that's been a problem for Brown. Not as much history with Rashee, but coming back from a nasty knee injury that honestly probably more concerning than coming back from an ACL. I mean, it was more that dark corner of the knee, so it's tricky comeback. But so far, it's looked great. Juju, I mean, he's a pro, but it's just like, how much does Juju have in the tank? Because he'll tell you there's a lot of miles on those knees. and Jalen Royal's rookie. I mean, how will he fit into this offense? How quickly can he pick things up? You don't know for sure. But if that trio at the top with Brown, Rice, and Worthy can stay healthy and play at their potential, well, let's face it. I mean, the Chiefs last year thought Rashee Rice was a 1,500-yard receiver before he got hurt. And based on the 288 yards in 3 games, that's believable. I mean, he was on pace for doing exactly that. If those guys can stay healthy, they give Mahomes a set of weapons that he probably hasn't had since at least 2020. Being able to put out guys like, when he had Tyreek and Sammy Watkins. Honestly, I mean, I think when we're talking about when McCole Hardman and Demarcus Robinson were his 3rd and 4th options, I think this receiver group is deeper than that. It's just they got to stay healthy. And that's important for, if anyone else, not just Mahomes, but for Travis Kelce as well. Because I think you saw the effects last year with Travis. He had to carry the load. And at his age, remember, he's going to turn 36 in October. That's just too much for his body. And, if he can find himself in a situation where the Chiefs don't have to play him as much, they can give him a little bit of workload management. And most importantly, just save him for the end of the season. I think he really hit a wall last year. And I think you saw it in the Super Bowl. Hey, you're 35, things start to take their toll.
Sure.
And if the Chiefs can find a way to, 1, give him less work, and 2, allow him to maybe see the occasional single coverage and not be in double and triple team all the time. That's teams knew last year. You take away Travis Kelce, you take away the Chiefs offense. And this year, if they can stay healthy at receiver, they won't be in that spot again.
Sure. No, I mean, I think that's the excitement right around this team is, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Staying healthy is key number 1. But if it does, what does that look like? Obviously we have Rice's potential suspension kind of looming over all of this. We're just touching base real quick on that. What's the latest you've heard in that regard, if anything?
Yeah, I mean, right now there's nothing on the books for him scheduled as far as a court date goes. There are some court dates set for civil trials, which are obviously completely separate. And the expectation all along is that the NFL is going to wait before the criminal process plays out before they take any action. So the last I've been hearing is that the expectation is that the criminal part of the Rashee Rice story probably won't be closed until after the season. So I, again, would be surprised if the league takes any action on Rashee until that chapter closes, which means you're probably not looking at a suspension until at least 26.
Wow. No, that's great insight. I think I will admittedly say that I think a lot of us lose track of that and just assume based off of the end of last year, it was potentially coming this year. So that's good news for fantasy football. Just kind of diving into, we touched based on Worthy, but it seemed as the season progressed and obviously Rice went down, Worthy started to run more of that Rice route tree. There weren't as many down the field targets. He ended up finishing ranked 72nd actually in average depth of target, yet 10th in separation amongst all qualified receivers, which is just, I saw that when we were putting this together and was just shocked by that, honestly. What do you think Worthy needs to do to bring back that down the field threat? Obviously, we touched base on everyone staying healthy and playing their roles, but from an Xavier Worthy standpoint, and then what do you think? Why do you think they did end up moving away from that? And is it something you expect to see back or Worthy back to doing as the season starts?
Yeah, the one thing that the Chiefs really kind of hoped to do a little bit last year was kind of keep Xavier in the X role or excuse me, the Z role and not ask him to do more than that. The injuries obviously forced them to use him everywhere. But one thing with the problems at left tackle, with the struggles against, having really only one down the field threat to try and break up a lot of the, two deep shells that the Chiefs were facing,
Mm-hmm.
they became, and Mahomes became kind of a game management type of passer last year. They focused a lot more on the short game, which meant that you saw Xavier Worthy running the jet sweeps that the Chiefs love to use. And that's obviously one thing that affects his usage, because the Chiefs obviously don't run the traditional jet sweeps. They run with the pop pass. So Xavier Worthy is going to get a lot of targets that are 4 and 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage. So that affects it a little bit.
Sure.
They used him with some screens, but you're right. As the season progressed, it stopped being Xavier Worthy deep balls and just trying to find a way to get Xavier Worthy the ball in space and make people miss. And that was one thing that was probably the only real deficit on his resume last year,
Mm-hmm.
was that because of his size, remember, might be like 185 pounds dripping wet. He's probably a little lighter than that. And and he had a lot of just arm tackles that brought him down. Chiefs would love to see him be a little bit more like Rashee Rice. Rice can run through a lot of tackles. That's how he gets a lot of his yards after the catch and after contact. Not as much with Xavier. He kind of has to use his speed to make people miss, because if they get a hand on him, he kind of went down last year. But one thing that we also saw from Xavier in the offseason workouts is that he and Mahomes really kind of struggled with the deep field connection early in the season before they kind of abandoned a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was twofold. One was certainly on Mahomes for maybe, not being able to get on the same page as quickly as Worthy. And a little bit was on Worthy, for maybe not running consistent routes, especially at the same speed. He also had a tendency to drift, where he'd get a little bit too close to the sidelines. And we saw a few balls that, hey, he caught, but were out of bounds.
Sure.
Sometimes he was just getting a little bit too far outside the boundary. This year, his route running looks a lot more crisp, especially on the deep balls. And he seemed to have, I didn't see as much of that this year. It's where he would just drift a little bit too close to the sidelines and get let out of bounds. Instead, he was running, really where he was supposed to go. The Chiefs, like a lot of teams on their practice field, they have that red line that as a receiver, you're not supposed to go outside. And he did a really good job with that, was doing a really good job with that in OTAs. So if he can do that, and most importantly, the Chiefs can have a second downfield threat. If Hollywood's healthy, so now that they've got two threats instead of just one, that should make Xavier's life easier too.
No, that's some great insight there. And on that note, we're going to take a quick break and we will be right back.
It is a damn shame we only get to a handful of rookie drafts every season. After doing all this rookie analysis, you want more bites at the apple. And that's why we have the Fast Draft Origins tournament. You draft 6 rookies, the top 4 into your lineup. It's best ball style, and it's just $5 to win a $5,000 first prize. So if you're passionate about Taj Brooks or RJ Harvey, get on Fast Draft and use your favorite creator's code to get a $50 deposit match. A $50 deposit match to go make thousands of dollars drafting the rookies that you know and love.
Gotta love the Matt Kelly apple. All right. So we kind of alluded to it earlier, but obviously Travis Kelce, his age, how they use him is a big part of this offense and will be a big storyline, at least out of the gun. We know teams are still going to have to respect him. He's not slowing down there, and especially if what happens becomes true and he can work that middle of the field underneath area because the field is stretched a little bit more this year. But from a usage standpoint, do we think Andy Reid changes anything? Do we think, we know we saw Noah Gray get a pretty decent contract. Does he start to become more involved? And, obviously you talked earlier about saving Kelce. So, I'm curious to see what that looks like. And then I have to ask this because I'm in a industry draft and I drafted Jared Wiley probably way too high because I loved everything that was happening last year. So I want to round up this question, just touching base on Jared Wiley. What's his role? So just thoughts on Travis Kelce, Noah Gray, and good old Jared Wiley. Let's hear it,
Yeah,
Matt.
yeah, you're not alone, because I fell in love with Jared Wiley last year. I was really impressed by him during the offseason and training camp. He can catch the football, and there's no doubt about that. We were sold that he was going to be a blocking guy, and he's so much more than that. The conservative estimate is that he'll probably miss the first quarter of the season. Could get back onto the field before the end of training camp. We'll really find out, once they get to St. Joe, as far as just how far he's progressed with that. But, he didn't do anything during OTAs on that knee, the ACL tear. So we'll see. I mean, like I said, the expectation is that if he's going to make a contribution, it'll probably be in the second half of the season. But there's a lot to like there for the rest of the room. Yeah, I mean, you've got Kelce and you got Noah Gray, that they're different tight ends. There's a obviously big size difference. Noah Gray is 6'3", and he probably has a ceiling because of that. Obviously big tight ends are the norm, and Patrick Mahomes likes a big target. So that, I think, does make life a little bit difficult for Noah Gray. But at the same time, he's become very reliable. The Chiefs know what they've got in him. He's consistent. And as a number 2 guy, I think he's probably one of the better ones in the league. It's just, is he ready to be a number 1 if needed? That I don't know if we've really seen him get that chance. And I know that, bless his heart, Chiefs don't want him to get that chance because they need their Hall of Famer to be their guy. And, and obviously, hey, Kelce, a lot was made about the fact that, he gave up his kind of chance to get to 1,000 yards. And last year was a little bit of a step backwards for him. I think with less usage, I wouldn't be surprised if Travis had a little bit of a rebound. He just needs to play fewer snaps. And once again, like we talked about earlier, if he can get just less opposition, so that maybe he's facing the occasional single coverage and, maybe more doubles than triple teams, I think he could be more productive than he was a year ago. The real interesting question is, what does happen with that third tight end spot if and when, Wiley is ready? Robert Tonyan probably had the best training camp of just about anybody during OTAs, rather. I'm really interested to see what happens when the pads come on, if he can keep that up, because he made a very compelling case for being the third tight end. But the Chiefs also brought in Jake Breeningstool, the undrafted free agent from Clemson. And he looks like an absolutely perfect fit for the Chiefs offense. Obviously, he's a lot closer in size and athleticism, I think, than to Kelce. And, you don't make that comparison lightly, because, he's not going to be Travis Kelce. Nobody's probably going to be Travis Kelce for a while. But he's got really good hands. He's got a really good reach. He showed an ability to really just go get the football. He got a little bit of, it looks like a hamstring tweak at the end of OTAs. So we'll see if he's ready to go at the beginning of camp. Didn't look like anything serious. But I think that's going to be a pretty tough battle between Breeningstool and Tonyan for that third tight end spot. And it could be that both end up on the roster, because we know Andy Reid loves tight ends.
Sure. No, that's a great call out. Honestly, it's crazy to go by. We went through running backs, we went through wide receivers, went through tight ends, and the depth at every position on this team is just the first thing that at least jumps out to me after this conversation here. Wrapping it up, what's couple things that you feel, one thing, however deep you want to go with this, that you feel listeners need to know about this offense that may not be immediately obvious?
Well, and this one might be obvious, but Mahomes needs to go back to being Patrick Mahomes. Last year was really a paradox year for him, and I get all of it. I mean, I think there was certainly the left tackle issues caused some issues. And the coaches even talked about it a little bit. Matt and Brett Veach, GM, even, kind of alluded to it during the combine when he talked about that. Patrick, he says, has seen so much that maybe he's seen too much, and that he just sees things and defenses doing things that maybe they're just not even doing to him anymore. And, and there's I wouldn't blame him for, hearing the footsteps last year and being a little concerned about that protection on his blind side. Whomever wins that left tackle job, whether it's Jalen Moore or Joshua Simmons, and Josh Simmons is further ahead than anybody expected at this point. The Chiefs were hoping that maybe he would be where he was at the end of OTAs. They were hoping he might be there in early August. So he's well ahead of where they expected. He might end up winning that left tackle job. And, if he does, it's because the Chiefs have faith in him. If they could even just get 2 or 3 starters, 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 average replacement level play at left tackle, Mahomes is going to feel a lot better. And then he needs to just go back to being himself. And let's face it, having Xavier Worthy with, what'd you say, the 72nd depth of target, and just even the depth of target that Mahomes had last year wasn't him. He needs to be taking more shots downfield. And interesting thing that Mahomes said during the offseason, which is that they want to mix it up. That in the past and last year, they tried to throw underneath to open up the deep ball. This year, they want to be more aggressive. They want to throw the deep ball to try and open it up underneath. And we'll see if that works, because you got to hit some of those. And obviously, that's the one thing that defenses have been trying to say to the Chiefs is you can throw underneath against us all day long. We just don't want Mahomes giving up 50-yard bombs to anybody. If the Chiefs can hit some of those, maybe they'll get some different looks, and maybe they'll get some different coverages that will allow Mahomes to kind of be himself a little bit. And I'll be honest, too, I think that the addition of Gardner Minshew as the backup on this team behind Mahomes, I think is really curious and interesting, because Minshew is more like Mahomes than anybody he's ever had behind him. He's younger than Mahomes, which Mahomes has never had before as a backup.
Yeah, that's
he's always
crazy.
He's had Chad Henne's and Blaine Gabberts and the Carson Wentz's of the world. And, you think about it in the quarterback room, what's Gardner Minshew going to be like? I don't think Gardner Minshew is going to be saying, hey, why didn't you check down to the running back here? Minshew's going to be the guy like, wait a minute, you had a guy down here, open 45 yards downfield. Okay, it was some tight window, but you can do that. I think that's the sounding board that he's going to get. And that may be exactly what he needs. So if Mahomes can go back to just, being himself, being that gunslinger that he wants to be, and this receiver group can stay healthy, I expect that this should be a top 5 offense again.
No, that's awesome. I feel like if we see, Patrick Mahomes in cutoff jean shorts with Gardner Minshew next to him in OTAs, that might be my favorite moment in the history of the world. I don't know if he'll share all that love with them, but that is a very good point with Minshew. And I think a lot of people forget that he's actually in Kansas City now. We've seen him kind of play fractional seasons the last few years, just as that kind of bridge QB or gets thrown into the action and is in that random QB competition. And it does sound like he's in a good home with the Chiefs and in the setup they have there. All right, Matt, wrapping this all up, let's let people know what you're working on, where to find you, everything. I mean, you guys do such great work. You personally do great work. What do you got going on? Where can everyone find you?
You're much too kind, Matt. Well, right now, after we get done here, I'll be working on some of the things we heard from the Chiefs today and Mark Donovan, their team president, about the new stadium and some of the college football games that they want to be bringing to Arrowhead. They've got Cincinnati and Nebraska coming up in August. That's the first of what they call the Kansas City Classic. They're hoping to bring multiple college football games back to Arrowhead in the future going forward. Later this week, kind of getting into our pre-training camp coverage. So there's going to be a breakdown of where the 53 roster projection stands right now, where the Chiefs stand as far as some of their position breakdowns. Getting into all of that. And then my partner on the 41 is the Mike, Nick Jacobs, and I. We've got a weekly podcast coming up. We've got a really fun one coming up this week, just kind of looking at the team breakdowns, because this is our last podcast before training camp starts.
Yeah,
so then after that, we're going to be really into the 2025 season for real.
Yeah, no, that is awesome. I mean, I think everyone's looking forward to training camp across the league. And I know, just to confirm with everyone, the Chiefs start, I believe you said, in 15 days. So what does that make that? 22nd
is the first practice. Yep.
No, that's awesome. Well, we look forward to hearing more from you throughout that time. We'll keep an eye on you through training camp. We'd love to get Nick in here down the road. And Matt, just want to thank you for your time today.
It's great talking to you. Love the show. It's a lot of fun.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you, all the listeners out there. Be sure to check out our Twitter website. We're here to give you all the latest info from Matt and his team. And be sure to check out Chiefs Digest as well. Thank you all.